Turtles Can Fly is a foreign, low-budget, neorealist auteur film set against the backdrop of a refugee camp in Kurdistan, a world far distant from the experiences of Western audiences. Still, American audiences gave this film a 92% approval rating, more than Twilight, Harry Potter, or the latest Bond film. Why? What is it about this film that speaks to audiences across boundaries of culture, language, and experience? Writer-director Bahman Gobadi has prepared for us a masterful allegory, framed and conveyed with striking images of three peculiar children devastated by war. Agrin is a beautiful young girl dressed in an exquisitely colored robe, stepping up to a cliff. This is one of very few close-ups we see in the film. Look at the contrast, her dark, deep crimson robe against the washed-out sky and the gray rocks beneath her. Here, without knowing any backstory, this extreme wide shot communicates her intense isolation. And still, the same image conveys a courage, a strength to her character. She stands at the top of the cliff, determined, alone. Then back to the close-up. The next scene takes us to a moment of thoughtful comedy. A dozen different silhouettes, all the villagers floundering to set up their own radio antenna. Again, notice the extreme wide shot. Here we do not sense isolation, but a happily familiar circumstance that connects us all. Everyone is trying to accomplish the same thing. And notice how the radio lines connect us visually with the villagers. Notice also the visual illusion of the sky in this shot to the sky in the previous scene. We're all trying to accomplish the same thing, every one of us. Next, we're introduced to Soren, a teenage boy who everyone calls Satellite. He works on a radio antenna against the same sky. Agrin enters the frame. We now anticipate that we might learn more about her story, why she jumped through her interactions here. Gobadi likes blocking scenes with characters entering and exiting the same frame, almost as if the camera were defining a stage. The scene ends with Satellite giving Agrin some rope and promising more. We're next introduced to our third protagonist, Hengoff. In a scene I will not soon forget, we hear only intimate, natural sounds. A bird chirping, Agrin holding her breath. The camera is surprisingly closer than normal. And notice the off-angle close-up. Agrin's expression is not what is important here. Her physical proximity to her brother, that's a different story. Over the course of the movie, we are introduced to an otherworldly preternatural landscape where maimed, disfigured orphans are forced to fend for their own livelihood among patches of minefield. These images are not something you forget. Agrin carries around her neck a blind child, the consequence of rape a couple years previous. Repeatedly, she tries to rid herself of the child. In this scene, we see the blind child Riga calling for his dad amidst piles of mortar shells. Agrin's attentions are elsewhere. But Hengoff, Agrin's clairvoyant brother, desperately tries to protect his sister and her child. The contrast of this young man's virtue against the constraints of his crippled body is a metaphor I've reflected on at length. Surely, if anyone is able to protect his family from this desolation, it must be Hengoff. But Agrin is hopelessly damaged. She looks for a way, any way, to escape her life. And her determination will not be derailed. Satellite's story is different. He's a brash, optimistic young man who sees in Agrin a pretty girl. He is making the best of things, maybe looking to start a family of his own, anticipating the new world full of technology the Americans will doubtlessly bring with them. Gobadi uses exclusively non-professional actors. From another director, this might be a liability. Satellite's character, for example, is not performed with the depth we might expect from a professional. His mannerisms and constant shouting border on overacting. But that doesn't matter. The script is crafted so that blocking and line of action overshadow the importance of any one particular performance. We see close-ups only when the director chooses to emphasize a turning point, and often those close-ups obscure the actor's expression. Character development, then, is communicated primarily through actions, gestures, interactions, irrespective of a given actor's talents. The script ensures it. Surely this must be a mark of excellence. Noteworthy also are Gobadi's storyboards. He sets these scenes up with such visual expressiveness that we as an audience are almost able to see a symbolism to the shortcomings of Saran's performance. Consider, for example, his relationship with Agrin and his affected expressions of love. This is a child, he doesn't know what love is, but his expressions are less important for their misrealization than as a contrast to the less than honest affection he demonstrates toward the children who unwaveringly follow him. Repeatedly, we see him ignore their well-being, only in the next breath to shout to some adult the responsibility he feels toward them. This paradox of affection comes to a head when Agrin's child wanders into a minefield. Here we have an exquisite image and a carefully blocked sequence. A blind, innocent child, alone in a minefield, with no one to help, and a crowd looking on. Satellite arrives to survey the situation. As an audience, we ask, what does he love? On the one hand, he might attempt to protect the child as an overture to Agrin or Hangoff, an act of self-interest. On the other, he might simply pretend to care enough for the child to demonstrate bravery for the benefit of the children looking on. Satellite does, in fact, for a moment hesitate. Has anyone gone to get his brother? Satellite had not come to the minefield thinking the situation would threaten his own safety. Even so, in a moment like so many that fill our lives, Satellite recognizes that if anyone is going to save this boy, it must be him. He enters the minefield recognizing the danger, but optimistic that nothing will happen. After all, he has managed to survive the war and harm this far, and the blind boy found his way into the minefield without getting hurt. But the child refuses to stand still, not after being shouted at or warned that he is in the middle of a minefield. He just doesn't understand. He's a child. So Satellite must invest himself to the situation further. As he approaches, the children looking on attempt to distract the child with a horn on Satellite's bike. It works, but Satellite looks back to his bike, clearly concerned that his material wealth has been drawn into the situation as well. Even still, after a moment, recognizing the mounting precariousness of the child's situation, Satellite offers the bike too. "Okay, I'll do it for you." The child's delight is obvious. Gobadi has a gift for capturing these genuine human moments. At this point, Satellite is fully invested. He has brought along with him every material possession he has accumulated over the course of his career. He offers the bike and the necklace he acquired in the market. We get the sense that there is nothing he will hold back from this child. He draws closer, constantly reassuring the boy that he is coming. Finally, Satellite's genuine humanity overcomes his self-interest. Then the mine explodes. The film ends with the appalling image of Riga floating dead in the water. We see Satellite swimming to try to save him, but the audience is startled from the dream by a crack of thunder. Hangoff's vision reveals that his sister has drowned her own child. Hangoff finds Satellite by the side of the pond, curled up in a ball, weeping for the drowned boy he would have given anything. This is not a popcorn movie, but it has layers. Never does it force on us an interpretation of the war, or its characters, or its message. It is a parable that dares us to step outside our own narcissism, to see the world as a community, and engage with others who desperately want and seek and beg for contentment in living. And yet, Hangoff, despite his clairvoyance, is unable to protect his family. Satellite, despite his resourcefulness, is unable to remain unharmed. And Agrin, despite her determination, is unable to secure for herself any stability or hope. As viewers, we are left not with neatly packaged answers, but questions. Why is it that these children have to live amongst these patches of minefield? Why is it that satellite's instinctive gesture of humanity is slapped away by the blast of a mine? Can we care for the vulnerable around us without ourselves becoming vulnerable as well? And even if we do make ourselves vulnerable, is hope something we can give others if they are not prepared to receive it? Here we have a demonstration of just how important a good script actually is. Gobadi, with a tiny budget, simple camera work, untrained actors, and very little post-production, is able to craft a film that audiences cannot help but remember. So the question for conscientious filmmakers and an industry now dominated by budgets and special effects and named actors has got to be, is it all worth it? Are the massive ad spends and contract negotiations and distribution agreements necessary to tell a story well? We're not arguing that performances and production design are not important, but Shakespeare, after all, is beautiful, whether it is performed by Olivier Brana or the local high school drama club. And unsophisticated audiences, without being pandered to or asked what they want, seem to agree.